Stop what you are doing right now, because what just happened might be one of the most explosive moments in modern American politics. The woman who spent 5 years being Donald Trump's most loyal soldier, the woman who fought for him harder than almost anyone in Washington, just went completely scorched earth. Marjorie Taylor Greene said this, and I quote: MAGA should never be told that a convicted pedophile and his circle of elite friends raping girls when they are 14 or 16 years old in a Democrat hoax. And I still can't believe I had to fight President Trump to release the Epstein files. That was what killed MAGA. That's not a Democrat saying that. That's not CNN. That's not the New York Times editorial board. That's a woman Trump once called one of his greatest supporters. And she isn't just disappointed, she is done. She described it as Trump disappointment syndrome, and she walked away from Congress entirely. So today we are breaking the whole thing down: the phone call, the files, the shutdown, the betrayal. All of it, just the facts, no spin. What's up, guys? I am Frank John, and you are watching your favorite channel, Joshu Reaction. This is where we bring you the real talk, facts, logic, and the news that the mainstream media is too afraid to show you. Today, we are decoding the viral clip of MTG that has shaken up the entire political landscape. If you want the real truth, hit that subscribe button right now. Alright, let's get into the actual story here, because there are a lot of moving pieces and I want to make sure you understand the full picture. It starts back in the summer of 2025. The Epstein files are blowing up everywhere. The FBI and DOJ had released a memo saying Epstein dead by suicide and that there was no client list. And a huge chunk of the American public, both on the left and the right, just didn't buy it. Greene went on CNN and said the whole thing had crossed a red line for a lot of MAGA supporters. Her exact words: Jeffrey Epstein is literally the most well-known convicted pedophile in modern day history. There needs to be transparency of the rich and powerful elites that were in his circle. That's pretty measured. That's a congresswoman doing her job. But here's where it starts to get complicated. In September of 2025, Greene held a press conference on Capitol Hill alongside Epstein survivors. She was pushing hard for the release for the remaining government files. She had signed a bipartisan discharge petition, meaning she crossed party lines specifically to force a House vote on releasing those documents. And then shortly after that press conference, her phone rang. According to Greene, in a profile published by the New York Times Magazine in late December 2025, Trump called her personally after that September press conference. During that call, which Greene says Trump initiated, the president told her he opposed releasing the Epstein files because his court friends will get hurt. Let that sink in a 1 second. He wasn't talking about national security. He wasn't talking about protecting minors. He said his friends would get hurt. Greene also says Trump told her he would not invite the Epstein survivors to the Oval Office because they had not, in his words, earned that honor, and she says he yelled at her while she listened on speakerphone. Now, I want to be clear here because this is important. These are Marjorie Taylor Greene's account for that private phone call. Trump has not confirmed this version of events, and it's worth nothing that Trump has never been formally accused of any wrongdoing related to Epstein's crime. That is a fact, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But what we do now is what just happened next in Congress, and that's where things get really interesting. House Speaker Mike Johnson initially backed full disclosure of the Epstein files. He literally went on a podcast and said, "We should put everything out there and let the people decide." Then he blocked the House vote that would have made that happen. Johnson then went on Fox News and said President Trump has clean hands. He's not worried about it. So he did a complete 180. Greene tore into Johnson's publicly, saying she said no respect for him not calling the House back to Washington to deal with the issue. And here's something that MTG has alleged. I'm going to present this as her claim because it hasn't been official confirmed. She stated publicly that the government went through an 8-week shutdown period, and she alleged that was specifically tied to stopping the Epstein resolution from getting a household. On top of all of this, a channel for news analysis found that investigators had previously discussed approximately 14.6 terabytes of achieved Epstein data. That's around 15,000 gigabytes. When the DOJ ultimately made a release, they put out roughly 300 gigabytes. That's about 2% of what investigators had on file. 2%. Attorney General Pam Bondi then sent a letter to lawmakers claiming the government had released all records related to Epstein and that nothing was withheld on the basis of political sensitivity. You can make your own call on whether 2% of the data counts as all records. Now, let's talk about what all of this did to MTG personally and what it means for the broader political picture. For 5 years, Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of Trump's most loyal and vocal supporters, she defended him at every turn. She fought his battles in Congress. She was the definition of a mega loyalist. And then came the Epstein phone call. Here's what she said publicly in May 2026, just days ago. To actually be asked by the president to back off and not help Epstein survivors, that's when MAGA did. That's when the entire thing shattered for him. That's a directly quote from her own mouth. And Trump, his response to all of this was interesting. He went on Truth Social and called MTG a traitor and a lunatic. He announced publicly that he was withdrawing his political support from her. Greene said those posts led to death threats against her and her family. She then announced her resignation from Congress effective January 5th, 2026. And Trump, when asked about the Epstein controversy by reporters, he called it boring stuff and referred to Epstein as somebody that nobody cares about. He also called the whole thing a hoax. Greene's response to the farming in her 60-minute interview was direct. She said, I stood for women who were raped when they were 14 years old, and the president that I fought for 5 years called me a traitor for that. Now, whether you love Trump, whether you can't stand him, whether you are somewhere in the middle, that is a serious statement from a serious politician. This isn't a random Democrat attacking the president. This is someone who had a front row seat inside the MAGA world for 5 years, and she's saying something went wrong here. Greene, standing alongside Epstein survivors, said these women have fought the most horrific fight that no woman should have to fight. And they did it by branding together and never giving up. That's what we did, fighting so hard against the most powerful people in the world. Even the president of the United States, in order to make this vote happen, the vote did happen. The Epstein Files Transparency Act passed, but as we have seen, 2% of the estimated data got released. The question of what's in the other 98% is still unanswered. Here's the part I want to spend a minute on because I think something we get lost in the political back and forth and we forgot what this actually about. This story isn't just about Washington drama. It's not just about MTG versus Trump. It's about something much more fundamental. It's about whether the government and any government can be trusted to tell you the truth about powerful people. If 14.6 terabytes of data exists and the DOJ says they have given you everything but puts on 300 gigabytes, that's a transparency problem. Full stop. It doesn't matter which party is in power. Greene said it plainly. MAGA should never be told that a convicted pedophile and his circle of elite friends raping girls when they are 14 or 16 years old in a Democrat hoax. And here's the thing, that sentiment across party lines, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, the vast majority of regular Americans agree that child abuse is not a political issue, it's a human issue. Rep. Thomas Massie made a cold political point when he said the record of this vote will last longer than Donald Trump's presidency. His message to his colleagues was simple: voters have long memories and a vote to protect powerful people over abuse survivors will follow you. When you think about the cost of living, gas prices, groceries, all of things that are squeezing families in the US and Canada right now, it's worthy asking. What kind of government do you want working for you? One that's transparent or one that tells you 2% is the full picture? That's not a partisan question, that's just a real one. So, the bottom line, Trump's relationship to the Epstein story is back in the news cycle, and this time it's coming from inside his own house. MTG isn't some political opponent trying to score points. She's someone who was in the room. She heard the phone call. She stood with the survivors when she says she was told not to. Has MTG crossed a line here, or is she finally saying what needed to be said? You can decide that for yourself. What I will say is this: the question of full transparency on the Epstein files isn't going away, not with 98% of the data will still sitting somewhere unreleased, with no survivors still speaking out, not with former allies now going on the record. I am Frank John and this was Joshu Reaction. I want to know what you think. Should the full Epstein files be released? Do you think the American people deserves complete transparency here? Drop it in the comments below. I read every single one. If you found this video valuable, hit that like button. It genuinely helps more people find this channel. Share it with someone who needs it to hear. And I'll see you in the next one. Take care, talk soon, stay sharp, stay informed. Bye bye.